Big Questions with the Dead Milkmen.
You know, guys, people talk about heavy metal and rap being violent, but you ever heard that song Shoot That Poison Arrow by ABC? That's some straight up Cannibal Holocaust style shit. Meds are calling. Boom. Greetings, gherkins, Democrats and Republicans, Christians, Jews, Muslims, and atheists, infants and the elderly. They can all agree on one thing. There's something seriously wrong with the RnR Hall of Fame. Madonna is in. Kate Bush is not. Bon Jovi is in. The Damned are not. Phil Collins is in. Need I say more? This week's big question is, how would you, yes, you, fix the RnR Hall of Fame? And we will not be accepting those like, oh, I'm too cool to care about the RnR Hall of Fame answers, all right? You have to do this. Otherwise, a bunch of adorable puppies will burn in hell forever. You guys don't want puppies burning in hell, do you? Heck no, you don't. Heck no, I knew you wouldn't. All right, so we're also going to hand out some bonus points for nominating a group or an individual artist who would never, ever get inducted under the current system. So here I go. My way to fix it is the way they fixed the Camden PD. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, the Camden PD had a huge police brutality problem, and they just fired everybody. They fired everybody in the Camden PD, and they said, you want to work here? Reapply. And some people would reapply, and they look at the record and they go, no. So that is what I would do. Shut it down and throw everybody out first. All right, you're all out. Then I would shut down the building and move the whole thing out to the internet. You don't need to see the artifacts that are there. If you want to see Jim Morrison's jockstrap, go eat at a Hard Rock Cafe, okay? The one piece I would keep from the actual physical RnR Hall of Fame is as you exit the building, above the door, there's a big sign that says, well, what did you expect, Dick Nose? So I would keep that maybe, but the rest of it, no, you don't need an actual physical building. All right, so once you kick everybody out, they have to reapply, or anybody could reapply for a band to be nominated. And nominees would be reviewed by a panel of experts. And the experts would be using the following definition. Now, I didn't come up with this. I don't know who did come up with this definition for rock and roll, but it's my favorite definition for rock and roll. Rock and roll is the music of the downtrodden electrified. So as a band would come in, they would take a look at that and they'd say, Joan Baez? Maybe not, and then they would AC/DC, fuck yeah. So I would just say that's a good sort of general rule to keep in mind, a sort of yardstick. On the panel of experts, there will be no poptimists. Right? Poptimists are basically a bunch of 11-year-olds who would piss their pants if they ever heard like 2 bars from a Judas Priest song. So all poptimists are out there right now trying to figure out a way to get Wang Chung into the RnR Hall of Fame. Sorry, poptimists. Not going to happen. Nobody's going to Wang Chung tonight. And what we do, we got the nominees, and then we would open it for public debate. And we might charge for this, but we would stream that debate over the internet. So if you think there's going to be some unintentionally hilarious comments on this video, imagine a group of adults like fiercely debating the merits or flaws of Pink Floyd. I could watch that forever. So what we do is I suggest 4 nominees, maybe start with saying, okay, we are going to include, and we'll make it clear, forebearers of rock and roll, people who may not have had electric instruments because electricity wasn't invented yet, but had contributed to rock and roll. Robert Johnson, hellhound on my trail, a guy who sold his soul to the devil. Very important. I would say he should get in. He should be, as you go in, maybe or on the website, hey, here are the people that sort of created this. As for picking groups, maybe pick, okay, let's pick 10 people, one from each decade, starting in like the 50s, or maybe let's say, okay, we get to pick a punk band to start with, a psychedelic band, a heavy metal band, go that route. So I think that may work. And then the other thing I would suggest is, let's nominate 2 people each year who aren't like rock and roll performers, but who really contributed, like Bob Moog or Jim Jones. Those are two good examples. I know somebody's probably going, it's Bob Moog. I know I did that just to upset you. So I would suggest doing that. And then the only problem we have here is what I call the mitigating factor. and this is something that kind of puts me up on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Some people contributed greatly to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but were horrible, horrible people. Ike Turner, Phil Spector, they're probably not going to get in. Then because we're going to say no, it's shooting people and beating Tina Turner, not in the spirit of rock and roll. If you could be like Elvis Costello and David Bowie, you could say and do some horrible stuff. And if you apologize sincerely, yes, you are going to get back in. We can say, okay, they said they're sorry and they meant it. And so we're going to go with that. Now you get into areas where there's like a band with a problematic member. But for problematic member, I'm thinking, okay, Throbbing Gristle, the Smiths, and the Bad Brains, I'll have at least one problematic member in the band. But maybe they should get in. But what you would do is on the website, again, everything is just going to be on the web. There would be a little like finger that says, by the way, and you would click on that and it would tell you like the misdeeds of the artist or the group. Like before you start wearing the t-shirt, you should know that this person did this or that. Eric Clapton's probably not going to get back in again, by the way. So that is my general idea for how to fix the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Again, I don't think you need nobody wants to come to a ceremony where you pay $25,000 for a table at it, and then you've got to sit there and see Dave Grohl perform with people. No, Dave Grohl, you're not getting in. You're a nice guy, but you're not getting in. So it's that's my general idea. Now, time for nominating. Band that probably won't get in. I have thought about the band Suicide, which was one of the first punk bands. They called themselves punk in 1970. Great band. But I thought one of you guys will probably nominate them. So I'm getting my foot in the door on that. What I will say is, okay, this is my nomination, and this will let everybody know, this drops the hammer and lets everybody know where we're coming from here. I'm going to recommend DJ Kool Herc, a.k.a. Clive Campbell. DJ Kool Herc invented the breakbeat. He's the guy who invented, and we know exactly where and when he invented it. He invented it on August 11th, 1973 at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx. That was where he was DJing, and he invented the breakbeat. And rock and rollers have taken from rap, have taken from hip hop. So you can't say, oh, this isn't rock and roll. I think it's a very good way to say, hey, wait a minute. Some stuff that people think, oh, that's not rock and roll, is rock and roll. And we will definitely acknowledge, certain types of rap and hip hop, gangster rap, Schooly D is rock and roll. So I'm thinking that's a good way to say, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to be strict about, nuts about this. It's not going to be all Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden, you are getting in, by the way. But it's going to be, kind of wider than that. So that is my way of fixing it. Before we move on, I think Joe is next. Before we move on to Joe, do we have any questions about my plans to fix the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I think they've been laid out pretty clearly.
I think about this every night before I go to sleep. Joe, before you speak, I just want to tell you something. Journey are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but the Minutemen are not. All right, Joe, what do you have to say?
Well, I was going to say just change the name to the Popular Music Hall of Fame and just leave it be. And I don't really care about it that much. I don't care if the puppies go to hell either.
But you should care. Rock and roll, things mean things. If you go, and I don't even know, I just want to make the point for caring. If I go to a exhibition of French Impressionism and French Impressionist painters, and there's a big, half the exhibit is Roy Orbison, and I say, why is Roy Orbison here? And the person goes, oh, you see, he sang Pretty Women, and there are many pretty women in France. Now I do my Roy Orbison impression. No, words should mean things, and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this is my thought, and I know you're saying, should be something that you want to get into.
Well, like you said, Joan Baez doesn't reflect rock and roll to me, maybe not even John Bon Jovi, but they're in there. So, and Dolly Parton didn't even want to be in there, and she got in anyway, apparently.
That's what I'm saying. Throw everybody out. Start all over.
Change the name or just bulldoze the whole building down. And if you want to start over, I guess start over. But I would just do that. And as far as inductees that haven't got in or probably will never get in, I would like to nominate a couple of them. I would like to nominate the KLF, who I just watched a video that Dean recommended. And also the Monkees, because they were very rock and roll and they didn't get in. Neither did Michael Nesmith or any individual monkey. And I'm not sure. I don't even understand the nomination process. I tried to find it on the Rock and Roll Hall of website.
No one does.
They say that it's not based on record sales or anything like that. It's like, did they contribute to the spirit and history of rock and roll?
You have to be famous enough.
Well,
no, you don't have to be. Because there's people in there that most people have never heard of.
I looked down the whole list.
What?
They have categories. They have legends. They have precursor, the people that were precursors to rock and roll. They have performers. They have people who aren't performers who are behind the scenes, like Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles. And there's another category too. I forget now.
I think I figured out the nomination process. Have you guys ever seen a movie called Scarface?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any more, Joe? Any more thoughts?
No, those are my nominees.
Okay. Now, Dan, before we move on to you, I would just like you to know that the Dave Matthews Band is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but Siouxsie and the Banshees are not. Now, feel free to let it fly.
You chose a brutal combo for me, man. Well, I would say one of the first things, kind of jumping off what Joe said, maybe not bulldoze the building, but like let some of the bands like take over the museum for a week or a month and then see what it looks like. And that would probably look more like a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because it would probably be trashed and there'd be beer cans everywhere. And you know, it's funny, I looked at the pictures of it and I was like, it's a beautiful building. It really does not look anything like rock and roll to me. And then I looked it up. IMK is the architect or the designer. And I guess they wanted it to, I don't even understand what you know what, we'll send a link. We'll put a link there to it, because I didn't understand what the motivation such that it's like, it looks like the sound of music coming down or something. It's like this triangular pyramid shape.
It wasn't actually IMK. It was his cousin, who was also a cousin of Ace Frehley. It was IP Frehley. Everyone laughed but Joe.
Joe's typing it up. Wait, it's really?
We went there on tour once. Was it when you were with us, or was it way back when that we went to the museum?
We never went to the museum.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of a personal trip that I took. I went. That's right. I went because my drumsticks were actually in the rock and roll.
Oh yeah. I tried to go in I think 2004 maybe. And Joe wasn't there for some reason, but low budgets, at least Chris and Steve and I were trying to get in with some other guys from Global Chaos who were on tour. And so we went and grabbed some wristbands out of a garbage can and put them on our wrists. And I had a purple one and they had like a green one or something. And we went in and the security guard was like, saw mine and was like, oh, you got the 3-day pass. And I was like, whoa. So then Chris and Steve come in and they let the security guard let us all in. And we go up to the first thing and it's like a record. And I was like, oh, wow. And then another security guard comes in. He's like, all right, you guys got to get out of here. And we were like, what? What's going on? He's like, we saw you take the wristbands or whatever. He kicked us out and, you know, some words were exchanged. And then we found out that if you're in a touring band, you're allowed to get in for free. But at that point, we were already kind of salty about the whole thing. So I still have never been in there. I think one of the biggest issues is that I looked it up and 719 inductees. How many do you think are women?
Maybe 20% at most.
8%.
Okay.
61.
Yeah, PJ Harvey's not in there. Exene Cervenka, the Go-Gos, the only all-female band to have a #1 hit written by the band, to have a #1 album, not in the Rock and Roll Hall of
They
Fame.
just got in this year.
Oh. So, well, their criteria doesn't make sense if it's really about like innovation and stuff, because why the fuck are the Foo Fighters in that? I'm sorry, we didn't plan to rag on Dave Grohl twice, but I can't stand that band. And Bob Seger, I should have stopped myself before I looked at all the inductees. I started to get angry.
Maybe they looked at his hair on the old album covers. They're like, we have to induct more women. Hey, look at this chick right here. nobody had the heart to tell them.
I will say my favorite thing about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was Dee-Dee Ramone's acceptance speech. I'm not even going to paraphrase it here. I'm going to leave a link to it. It's short and sweet.
Well, I should put up a link to Rick Wakeman's acceptance speech too, which is fantastic.
Oh, I don't know.
Dan, do you have any more to add before we move on to Dean? First of all, thank you, because now I know why it took him so long to let Motorhead in, because of what you guys did. They were like, we better wait till Lemmy dies before we can't have a repeat of these people taking stuff out of the garbage.
Oh, the bonus.
Oh, sorry.
I would say Gigi Allen, and I don't think he would ever get in.
There you go.
And I think he deserves to, because I think he exemplified rock and roll, seriously, because he was just trying to fuck with everyone by using himself, which is amazing and frightening.
Okay. Before we move on to Dean, let me remind you, Billy Joel is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but XTC are not. Anything you'd like to tell us?
I have various opinions about all this. Yes, I think it's a stupid organization. Like the museum and the sort of physical representation of it all is located in Cleveland, but the administration of the whole affair is done in New York City for some reason. It's just dumb. I guess of the four of us, I'm the only one who's actually been to the museum and toured around it. And the reason I went was there was a fellow named Peter Lavenger who collected drumsticks, and he had a large collection of drumsticks, including a pair from me. And they made it into the cut. There was a giant wheel of drumsticks on display there. And so I went to see the exhibit. And I personally like to look at that kind of stuff, like memorabilia type stuff. So I actually enjoyed the museum. So, and I would go again just to see what, they change the exhibits up all the time. So I personally enjoyed visiting the museum. As for the organization and the role of people who are in and not in, it's really bad. I came up with a concept of maybe switch to, and it's also unreasonable, but I mean, come up with a list of rock genres. I mean, you can look up a list of rock genres on Wikipedia, and it's like, hundreds and hundreds. And maybe one artist from every genre gets in every year. I mean, if you're making a list, you're just going to throw people on the list, and why not throw 100 people on every year? Why not? There's plenty of bands out there, plenty of musicians that are worthy of recognition in terms of contributions to rock and roll. I found a unofficial site not affiliated with the Hall of Fame, but had lots of detailed information about bands that were in, bands that were out. There's a page on there that has bands listed by year that have not been inducted. And we're listed on there, by the way. We were eligible in 2009. And I believe the criteria, one of the only factual criteria that you need to meet to be eligible is your first recording had to be at least 25 years previous. So they claim that we were eligible in 2009 because our first recording came out in 1983. I'll provide a link. There's a page, you can click on our name and you can vote yes that we should be nominated, and you can actually make a comment there. I think they have a percentage listing of our chances of getting in are right now it's at 5%. So if everybody watching this goes there and clicks on the link, maybe we can raise our percentage of getting in.
We have less percentage of chance than women.
Yeah.
Wow.
So as for the bonus question, I have a couple. I would like to see Sun Ra in there. I would like to see the Cramps in there. And as Rodney mentioned Suicide, but I actually had lumped it all together with any of the sort of New York no wave bands like Suicide, Bush Tetras, James White and the Blacks, the Contortions, Teenage Jesus and the Jerk, Lydia Lunch, all those people, somebody from the the no wave kind of scene back in the 70s in New York. I mean, nobody from that group is represented in the Hall of Fame. So those would be my nominees.
Does anybody know why they induct somebody like after they're dead? Because I noticed that
You
T-Rex,
don't have to be dead.
but I mean T-Rex was inducted in 2020. Like, why the hell did it take so long for him to be inducted? And he had died. When did he die? In like the late
70s and
70, I think, or early 70s. Yeah.
So I wonder what's that all about? They're like, well, he's been dead for 40 years, so I guess we can nominate him. Like, what?
The problem is they have a list and they started jumping over people. This is one of my problems is. So it's like there are whole eras they jumped over so they could appease like the people at Pitchfork. So you'll see like the Black Keys will wind up getting in before, the Cramps, for example. That's that whole era is going to get jumped over. So they've already put Beyonce in, a fine performer and everything, but you never see a kid carve like Beyonce next to Black Sabbath in a desk in detention.
Or into his arm.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it seems to be that they seem to have jumped over an era. I don't know if Lenny Kaye is still involved. He actually knew a lot about music and I think was a good judge of it. But I think the idea now is, well, let's get, these old bands are out there touring. So let's get them in there because there's still some interest in, and let's get the stuff like, they're sitting around going, what are the kids listening to? Beach House? Yeah, we'll put that. So, or at least they bring them in to nominate them. And they managed to nominate Bruce Springsteen 4 times or something. They keep nominating him in different categories. They nominated Bruce Springsteen as for Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band solo performer. They nominated the E Street Band by themselves. And then they nominated Bruce Springsteen again for threatening to slap Joe because Joe wants to see puppies burn in hell.
He's in there.
He's in there a bunch of times. There's a bunch of people who are in there. I think Dave was in there a bunch of times. You can get nominated and renominated. And so, yeah, I mean, there's just, you should only maybe get in once unless, I mean, there's a couple of people who are interesting across a series of bands. Brian Eno is not in there. How is Brian Eno not? Yeah, it's just none of it makes any sense to me.
Bob Dylan's in, but the Traveling Wilburys aren't.
I can live with that.
They apparently within the last few years they started nominating bands like you were saying without this, like James Brown, but the Famous Flames just got in.
Okay.
Which makes sense. That band was tight as fuck too.
It's weird because like Van Halen are in, but they'll say, well, so and so can't be in. So it can be Van Halen with Sammy Hagar and with David Lee Roth, but that the middle singer, who I believe was Shirley Bassey, I might be wrong. They're not in. So they have a bunch of really weird roles. And they asked the Clash to come, and they inducted the Clash. They keep inducting people against their will, and they're wanting them to come there and play. And they're like, no, the Clash make music for people, not record executives. Bruce Springsteen, by the way, had wanted to front the Clash, and I thought maybe he's trying to get inducted again as like a member of the Clash. But yeah, I just think it should mean something. It should be something that I would want to be in. I should look at it and go, oh, cool, you guys put Suicide in there, and you put you put Cool J's in, but you put just grab anybody I love and just say
Cabaret Voltaire.
Yeah, Cabaret Voltaire are in there, or God, I keep blanking on who. Schooly D. That's right. Schooly D is in there. Schooly D invented gangster rap. Gangster rap is from the roots of rock and roll. It's influenced rock and rollers. Schooly D should be in there. So I'm just saying.
NWA is in.
NWA is in. I'm fine with that. Gangster rap, I think, is a form of rock and roll. I think it's closer to rock and roll than it is to rap songs about like, I've got, $1 million limo. And, no, I think that, there's a lot of stuff. I'm glad Run DMC are in. Run DMC are a rock and roll band. A lot of those bands consider themselves. What?
Tupac's in, yeah.
Tupac is in, yeah. So they have made some distance, unless you're a woman, in which case, just if you're a woman and you're watching this, just don't bother working on your acceptance speech. They don't want to hear from you. But you will probably get into our Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if we get our changes put in. Because we have a long list of women that are going to get in. Talking Heads are going to get in, except for David Byrne. it'll be the Tina Wyman show. All these people praising Tina Wyman, or maybe that's what we'll have. We'll have a big statue of Tina Wyman with lasers that come out the eyes, and they'll burn anybody who tries to steal tickets out of the garbage. Okay. Oh. We should move on to Dan. I consider that probably one of the most rock and roll things that ever happened there. I salute you, my brother.
It didn't really occur to me until afterwards how cool that actually was. We were just kind of pissed.
It is. It's one of those things I guess you realize later on. It's like bungee jumping on acid. At the time, it doesn't seem that exciting. But when you look at the photos that the police took later on, you say, my God, I left my pants at home. All right. Okay. We better move on to recommendations because I've only got one this week. My recommendation, I've only got one because this is a super serious recommendation. I'm recommending a band called Them Two Are Us. Them Two Are Us was a band that are no longer around. It was a duo. They sounded a lot like the Cousteau twins, but with a bit of a harder edge. If you listen to them, you will love them. You guys love the Cousteau twins. We all love the Cousteau twins. People love the Cousteau twins. This is it with a little more grit, and it's really, really good. They were Kennedy Ashland and Cash Askew. Now, the reason I'm mentioning them is, folks, we have a new song we've been working on that references the Ghost Ship Warehouse fire, which was a tragic event. I think it took place in 2016 in Oakland. And Cash Askew from the band Them Two Are Us, she had gone there that night to see a bunch of like avant-garde hip hop acts. So she was doing her job as a musician. She was going out somewhere to check out new sounds, and the place caught fire. There were really no proper exits. The whole thing was a nightmare, and she died. Now, I would recommend that you check out their Amends album, which was put out after her death. It is a fascinating album. But this, what I'm doing right here, this is what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame should do, should educate people. It should say, hey, here's a band you may have never heard of, and here's a cool story behind them, and here's a person that could be considered a hero in many ways, out there doing your job as a musician, becoming a better musician by listening to stuff. Same David Bowie did that. David Bowie, up until close to the end, would go out to the little clubs and check stuff out. He did his job, and she was doing her job. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I don't think it's doing its job, because you can go in there and you can get told about the Beatles for 2 hours, but people know about the Beatles. They don't know about Them or Us. So become your own Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Learn about bands like Them Two Are Us, and just wander around telling people about them and do your job as a music fan. All right, thank you.
Amen. Cut and print.
Mic drop.
I'd like to recommend a video on YouTube called Tongues, Brain Sauce, and Other Delights for the 19th and early 20th century menus. And these are in the United States. And it's on the YouTube channel of Adam Ragusea. I don't know if that's how you say his name. But my boyfriend sent me this, or showed me this video a couple of days ago, and I thought it was really interesting. It's basically his look at a book that came out about 11 years ago called Menu Design in America. And it's kind of a fascinating look at what was on menus in restaurants in the 1850s to like early 1900s.
Cool.
Check it out.
What's your favorite dish from 1880, Joe?
It might be mutton and caper sauce. But I haven't eaten it yet.
How did you have that answer so ready? So I can ask
Sounds
you what
good
day of the
to me.
week it is. I got to wait 10 minutes for you. Thursday. But no, mutton's and caper
I
sauce.
just thought this video was fascinating.
I'm writing that down. That might be a song at some point. But that sounds like an XTC song.
Mutton and caper
sauce. We're going to Swindon to get tossed.
Oh, shoot. I'm trying to remember what I was going to recommend. Let me find a backup. Oh, here we go. This is a classic.
Ooh.
The show Barry with Bill Hader. I was like kind of obsessed with it. The first 2 seasons, like I watched them twice, and then the pandemic happened and had to wait 2+ years to see season 3. And I guess they're like halfway through it now, maybe. So check it out. Barry, it's on HBO, I think.
So series has actually gotten better as it's gone along, which most series don't. So
Yeah, toward the end of season 2 was really intense. So that's that.
I have 2 recommendations. One is a recording which you can listen to it online, but you can actually download it. It's 8 hours long. It's by Vangelis, and it's called the Go-Gos tapes. And the Go-Gos tapes was never released commercially. He made this music for his friend who was a microsurgeon and had a series of VHS tapes showing his microsurgery and his narration, and he wanted some interesting music back behind him. And so Vangelis said, I'll record you like 8 hours of synth noodling and music or whatever. And it's pretty good stuff. You can put it on and work to it. It's 8 hours. It's a work shift length recording, and you can actually download the recording and, play it wherever you want. So it's called the Go-Gos tapes, and I have a link to it. The other thing is a video on YouTube. I've mentioned the band and recommended them a couple times already. The band is called Yard Act. They have a new video out called 100% Endurance, which is really good. I recommend you check that out and watch to the end because it's really good.
I found out a fun rock and roll fact today. The guitarist for the band EMF lived next door to serial killers Fred and Rose West. And yeah, when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's unbelievable.
Oh,
things. No, but he really did. I'm all right.
I wonder if they're in the rock and roll.
Bye, Fletch. You will be missed.
Alan White.
Yeah, Alan White and also Ray Liota died.